Hey everybody, Evan from Codify here. Welcome to week 6. That means you're officially starting JavaScript. So I know that the playlist of videos for this week is pretty thick. It's pretty long. I think there's 11 videos, and they all go into some pretty new material. It is okay for it to feel intimidating at this point. In fact, I would be surprised if it doesn't, at least in some way. But don't worry, I need you to trust in the process. These next 2 weeks, Module 6 and Module 7, are pretty heavy on fundamentals and some theory. And that's really just because these are the building blocks that we need to lay down and get out of the way before we can really get to the more interesting, more fun, more creative problem solving using JavaScript. You need these building blocks in order to get to the fun stuff, get to the good stuff. Okay, so bear with me for just 2 weeks. If you're going at your own pace, then I would say don't camp out here, if you know what I mean. There is a lot of material here, and I definitely understand the compulsion to just stick to Module 6 and Module 7 for several weeks in order to make sure that you understand everything perfectly. I get that, I really do. But you won't be doing yourself any favors. Now, I'm not saying that you should just blindly push ahead and not try to understand what we're discussing, but you're going to get more value out of having a little bit of trust in the process and pushing forward to apply a lot of this material that you're learning than you will by just sticking around and drilling data primitives. Okay? So try to get as much as you can. Try to be open to the material that we're throwing at you. But don't expect to walk away with 100% comprehension after the first go-round. Go through the material again, go through it a third time, but don't camp out here. Keep pushing forward. If you hit Module 9 and you're still feeling completely lost in the woods, then that might be the time to have a discussion with me or one of the other mentors, or hit the pause button and maybe backtrack a little, retrace your steps. I promise you that by the time you get to week 9, the material that we're throwing at you now is going to feel like it's going to feel much, much easier. And the reason is because you're going to have the bigger picture by that point. You're going to have the bigger picture that allows you to contextualize and really apply everything that we're talking about here. Right now, it's going to feel esoteric and almost meaningless, but it's just part of the process. I need you to trust me on this. I need you to trust me. We can't start with the big picture, unfortunately. We can't. We need you to have these building blocks in order to move forward. So let's do it. Let's jump right in. Hopefully by now, you have started to think about your portfolio. It's week 6, which means there's 10 weeks left after this, if you're on the standard pace. And by the end of those 16 weeks, we do want you to walk away with a portfolio. So hopefully you've been thinking about domain names. Hopefully you've maybe picked one by this point. It's also a good time to start thinking about portfolio themes. So if you go to codifyacademy.com/themes, you'll find a nice selection of some very diverse pre-coded themes for you to use. They're really cool. They have a lot of cool features, a lot of animations. They feel nice and professional. The reason that we have these themes for you and why we're not saying go build your own is not because we don't want you to get the experience of building your own portfolio theme, or we don't think you can. It's not that. It's not that at all. It's that in designing websites in a commercial application, you are rarely going to be coding from scratch. You're rarely going to be working in a vacuum. You're never going to have to reinvent the wheel every single time you start a new project. You're going to have themes, you're going to have pre-built components or pages or layouts that you go to and use frequently. And it has its own set of challenges, its own skill is required when you have to deal with someone else's code, especially if it's a lot of code or complicated code or code that feels a little bit beyond you right now. There are some unique challenges there that you're going to have to deal with on the job, especially if you work in a big company. You're never going to code in a vacuum. You're going to be grappling with a lot of other people's code, looking at a lot of other people's code, using it, integrating your own code with it. So this is a good opportunity to practice that. These themes are really solidly built, and they just push the boundaries of where you should be at this point in time, which means that they're going to feel challenging. That's the point. You're going to have to stretch and reach a little bit to use these effectively. More than that, your portfolio is extremely important, and we don't want you to agonize over every single detail and try to make the perfect work of art. Ideally, you leave this course with a portfolio, a minimum viable product at the very least. Okay? Get something up there, get something live, get something out there, so that if a recruiter walks up to you on the street tomorrow, or you run into one at a bar, or at a meetup, or at an event, and they say, hey, can I see your stuff? What's your website? You better have something to give them. If you don't, because you've been sitting on your portfolio for 3 months trying to make it super avant-garde and different and distinguished from everything else on the web ever, well, that's awesome, but they're going to move on, and you may have lost an opportunity. So get something up there, and then, if you really want, you can take all the time in the world making your perfect digital business card or digital resume. Okay? These themes are very cool, though. Pick one that you like. Once you select it, you can demo them, see what it would look like as a live site, and the idea is to come in here and make it your own. Swap out the images, swap out the text, figure out how they work. Oh, this is a great feature. This is a cool one. See, now this is CSS transition animations triggered with a button click, which is JavaScript. You're going to figure out how to do this on your own, but you've already got this pre-built for you. You can come in here and insert your own projects here, your own portfolio pieces. Anyway, you get the idea. They're very cool themes. Pick one to use and give it a try. Practice integrating your own content with it. Alright, so number 5, where do we write our JavaScript? Well, we write our JavaScript in an external script sheet. We call it main.js. Main.js. So let me pull up a template. I've got a starter template here. So all it has is index.html, an image folder which is empty, and a CSS folder with main.css. This truly is a starter template, as you can see. There's not even Font Awesome or Bootstrap. But to attach an external script sheet, first we're going to create a new folder called JS. And inside this JS folder, we're going to create a new file, which I'm going to save as main.js. And then we're going to connect this script using a script tag at the very bottom of our body. And it's going to look like this. Okay. Now the reason why we load our scripts at the bottom of our body is because if there's an error in your JavaScript, an error of any kind, then the browser will stop loading your page completely. it will just stop. Everything will halt. By including our script at the bottom of our body like this, we ensure that at the very least, if there's an error in here and everything has to stop, at the very least we have all of the content of our body, all our HTML and our CSS has loaded. So our visitor is not stranded on a blank page. Okay? Simple as that. So with this, we've connected our main.js file inside our JS folder. Note that a script tag uses a source attribute, unlike the href attribute of a link tag. Also, a script tag has a closing tag, unlike a link tag, which only has an opening tag, also known as a void tag. A script has a closing tag, script uses source, scripts are for JavaScript. Alright, and that's where we write our JavaScript. How do we connect our JavaScript to our HTML? Well, we just went through that. What is wrong with the following code? Once again, scripts use source attributes, src, not href. So that is what is wrong with this line of code. What's the most important browser tool we use when writing JavaScript, and what is it good for? Well, that's an easy one. That is our developer console. So you open your inspector, and next to the Elements tab is this Console tab. In this console, we're going to do everything. Whenever we're writing JavaScript, we live in this console. We test in this console. We try out new lines of code in this console. We get the opportunity to see exactly what is going on in our applications from this console. What is the main difference between 8 and 8 in quotation marks as far as JavaScript is concerned? Well, 8 is a number, whereas 8 in quotation marks is a string. See, if I run this type of function, which you don't need to know. You don't need to know what type of is, but what it does is it simply tells me what type of data primitive we have inside these parentheses. Type of 8 returns a number. Type of 8 in quotation marks returns a string. Okay, that is a very important distinction. What is it called when we combine multiple strings together? For example, combining a first name and a last name to form a full name. That's called concatenation. Concatenation. Just like that. Okay. Number 11, how do we expect the following statement to evaluate? So I want you to, when you do these, I want you to think about it first. Maybe try to do it in your head. But more importantly, I want you to test these yourself in the console. You need to go through those steps. You need to test these in your console, even if you're positive, even if you know that 6 times 8 is 48, and there's no question. Test it in your console. See what it evaluates to. Something to keep in mind as you go through exercises like these is that the most important question to be asking yourself is not what does this evaluate to? What's the value that comes out of it? That's not the most important question. The most important question is what type of data does this evaluate to? Or what type of data primitive does this evaluate to? In other words, 6 times 8, what data type should that evaluate to? It should evaluate to a number. Okay? The fact that this 48 is a number is more important to us than the fact that it has a value of 48. That is something you want to always bear in mind with JavaScript. Then we have 100 mod 9. You should remember from the videos that mod returns a remainder. So what data type should we expect to return to us? A number, value of 1. How about this one? 101 plus 52 in quotation marks. So now we're adding a number and a string. Do you expect it to convert that string into a number and give us 153? Or is it going to convert that number into a string and just concatenate them for 10152? Or is it going to do something else entirely? This is one of those times when you need to ask yourself, what data type is this going to evaluate to? Number, string, something else? Well, the answer is a string. Okay? Adding a number and a string like this actually coerces that number into string form, and then you're just concatenating. How about this? Hogarth plus Hughes. Concatenating strings, so we should expect a string, but it's a string that doesn't quite look right. We're missing a space. To fix it, we would need to add a space after Hogarth, a space before Hughes, or an entirely separate string which just contains an empty space between the two. Consider the example of combining a first name and last name from the videos for this week. We had a variable first name plus a space, which is a string, plus a variable last name. Now, we, as the developers, don't know the name of the visitor to our site. We can't control that. We can't accurately predict that. We can't reasonably expect to know their name. So, do we care about the value of first name and last name, or do we just care that they're strings? Okay, think about that for a minute, because that's kind of the guiding force behind JavaScript. We don't care if the visitor's name is Hogarth Hughes or Evan Winston or Matt Brody. We just care that first name is a string and last name is a string. Okay, and we make sure that they are strings by asking the user, what is your first name? The user's not going to type in 7. The user's not going to type in 1052. They're going to type in their name, which we can reasonably assume is going to be a string, a block of text, some letters. Okay? So that's really the mindset behind JavaScript and coding for users. We're anticipating. And what's important to us is the type of data that we receive, not the value of the data. We have to start thinking a little bit more abstractly. If that doesn't make sense, bear with me a little bit. We'll get there. Okay, number 15. How do we expect the following statements to evaluate? False plus true. Well, we have two booleans with a plus sign in between them. So are we going to concatenate them? Is it going to turn into a string? Or is it going to return another boolean like false? It returns a number. So this is actually a weird one. And this is why I say you should always check in your console. You should always run this code in your console. Anytime you write a new line of code, if you're not positive about what that's going to return, and you should not be positive until next month of anything, unless you're positive and until you're positive, you always run that line of code in your console before you do anything else. Okay? So what's happening here? Well, let's keep going a little bit. We've got true plus true. That gives me 2. And false plus false gives me 0. Okay, so what do you think's happening here? What's happening is both these booleans are actually being coerced into numbers. And all booleans actually have some kind of inherent numeric value, 0 or 1. You guys seen the matrix? Remember how everything is composed of zeros and ones? comes back to this. Everything is binary. 0 and 1, true or false. Booleans. Everything is binary. So this can be really useful in setting up your code. Okay? Don't think too hard about it. Just understand that Booleans can be coerced into numbers. That when you're concatenating or adding, you have to be careful and make sure you understand what data type is being returned to you. Okay, number 16. Given the following code, get rid of this. Now I'm doing all of this in my console right now just to demonstrate how I would like you guys to approach it. If you want to do this in your code, in your main.js file, that's totally fine by me. But I want you to get practice using your console. Okay, so var total equals 9. And to break to a new line in your console, because if I hit enter, it's just going to evaluate. To break to a new line in your console, hold shift and hit enter, and I can continue writing. Total plus 4. Okay, so the question is, what is the final value of total? Now what I mean by that is, we have 2 lines of code here. I execute them, and the console spits 13 back at me, which is great, but that's not what we want. 13 is the result of this expression. What I want to know is, what is the final value of the total variable? If I call the total variable right now and hit enter, it's going to tell me the value of total. And the value of total is still 9. Okay, take a moment and think about that. I haven't changed the value of total since it was declared. Now I set up an entirely new expression where I added 4 to total, but total itself is still 9. So let's run this another way. Var total equals 9. Var new total equals total plus 4. Total, still 9, but new total is 13. Okay, simply running an expression where we add value to a variable does not change that variable. Let's try this one other way. Var total equals 9. Okay, so total is 9, but I want to update total. I want total to equal 13. How do I do that? Total equals total plus 4. Okay, what we're doing is we're taking the variable total and reassigning it a new value of its current value plus 4. We are updating total by 4. So total is now 13. You're going to see this a lot. You're going to see this kind of pattern a lot in JavaScript. Most commonly, you're going to see it as I equals I plus 1 in our for loops, which once again, this is adding 1 to the value of I. We're increasing I by 1. Okay? Let's keep going. Given the following code, what is the final value of name? Well, in this case, we are actually updating the name variable by itself plus Hughes. So the final value of name should be Hogarth Hughes. Number 18. What's the difference between the following 2 statements? I'm going to set total equal to 9. No, pardon me. Total equal to 9. And then I'm going to run total equals total plus 7. If I call total, it has a value of 16. Total has a value of 16. Let's try it the other way. Set total equal to 9. And I'm going to run total plus equals 7. Excuse me. Now if I call total, sorry about that. If I call total now, total has a value of 16. It's the same thing. Exact same thing happened. Moral of the story, total equals total plus 7, and total plus equals 7 have the exact same meaning. Plus equals is a shorthand for itself plus 7. So total plus equals 7 is the same way as writing total equals itself plus 7. We're incrementing total by 7. By the same token, there's minus equals, times equals, divided by equals. All of these are shorthands for this pattern. Number 19, what two methods did we learn to generate a pop-up message on our page? Which one returns value we can later use if we store it in a variable? Well, we learned alert, which causes a pop-up. It says this is an alert. It expresses, or it shows me the string which I wrote inside these parentheses. And then we learned prompt, which gives us a text field, right? What's your name? And then I can type Evan in here. But look at that. Prompt actually returned to us the string that I wrote in. Now I can't use that string right now. It's lost to memory. I can't retrieve it. I can't access it. But if I store prompt in a variable, as we did in our exercises, and I say my name is Kingsley Papagiorgio, well, now the name variable contains that string. And I can use that string. Okay? List 8 comparison operators. When you see a comparison operator in JavaScript, in a JavaScript statement, how do you expect that statement to evaluate? So the comparison operators are less than, greater than, less than or equal to, greater than or equal to, double equals, triple equals, not double equals. These are all comparison operators. And whenever you see one of these comparison operators in any context, you must expect the statement to evaluate to either true or false. It's always going to be a boolean. 8 is greater than 4 is true. 8 is less than 4 is false. Name equals Kingsley, Kingsley Papagiorgio is true. Okay, this is not assigning a value to name. Name already has a value from that prompt that we ran, and this double equals is checking. Does name equal Kingsley Papagiorgio? It does, and therefore this statement is true. If I run the same thing with not equals, it is false. Okay? Now, logical operators. List the 3 logical operators. There's and, or, and not. If you're not sure where these pipes are, they're right above your enter key on your keyboard. Okay? Whenever you see one of these operators as well, you must expect the statement to evaluate to true or false. Okay? 8 is greater than 4, and 4 is greater than 3 is true. Doesn't matter how long the statement is. Let's do name does not equal Kingsley Papagiorgio, or name equals Kingsley Papa Giorgio. This is some dumb logic, but we have a false statement or a true statement. And with or, you only need one statement to be true. So this whole statement evaluates to true. Then we have not. So let's say not name does not equal Kingsley Papa Giorgio. Name does not equal Kingsley Papa Giorgio is itself a false statement, but we have not wrapped around it. So not false is true. Okay, no matter what, no matter how long, how complex an expression like this might look, if you see a comparison operator, if you see a logical operator, all you need to think is Boolean, true or false. Figuring out whether it's true or whether it's false is a separate issue, but much more important is Boolean, true or false, data type. Okay? Number 23, fix the following code. If name equals Matt, console.log, Matt is logged in. So what's wrong with this code? Well, hopefully you remember how if conditions work, right? What do we need inside those parentheses? Whatever's inside those parentheses either has to be true or false. If true, run the code inside. If false, do nothing, or jump to the else statement. So what's in these parentheses must be true or false. Therefore, what's wrong with this code? The problem is this single equal sign is an assignment operator. This is going to try to assign the string Matt, the value of the string Matt, to the name variable. What we really want to do is check, does name equal Matt? And for that, we need at least one other equal sign. 2 would also work. Now, name does not equal Matt. Name equals Kingsley Papa Giorgio. But let's see what happens if we run this with just the single equals. So let's change this to name equals Kingsley Papa Giorgio, and if that's true, KP is logged in. Oh, looks like somewhere along the way I reset my variable. There we go. There we go. Okay, so we need, if you see a single equals inside an if condition like that, you should know right off the bat something is wrong. It's not right. Okay, number 24. How many times will this loop run? It's going to run 10 times. When I has a value of 0, all the way to when I has a value of 9. As soon as I becomes 10, this middle statement, look at that, that's a comparison operator. This middle statement returns false, and the for loop breaks. So 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. That's 10 times. In fact, let's try it real quick. I'm going to console log I. We get 0 through 9. And then the loop stops. Okay. How many times will this loop run? Well, what do we have? We have I is less than or equal to 10. So how many times is that going to run? The answer is 11 times. 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 11 times, because now it's including 10. For loops are by far the most complicated thing you'll be dealing with for the first 2 weeks. And the best way to get used to them, the best way to internalize them is really to use them. You're going to get a lot of practice with them on the extra practice section of this module. So put some real time into that. There's also a video of myself walking through the solutions there, but try very hard, please, to do them on your own. You will not be doing yourself any favors if you just jump straight to the solutions. Number 26, how many times will this loop run? Well, this is an interesting one. We've got for I equals 0, I is less than 50, I equals I minus 1. This is an infinite loop. It's an infinite loop, and the reason is because the way we're changing I every time is by decreasing it by 1. And as a result, I will never be anything but less than 50. I will never be a value which causes this statement to return false. I starts at 0, and then it's going to be -1, -2, -3, -4, all the way to infinity. It's an infinite loop, and that will crash your browser, so be wary of those. How many times will this loop run? Var my string equals hello. For var I equals 0, I is less than my string dot length, I equals I plus 1. So this is an interesting case where we are using the length of this string variable as our terminating condition, which means this loop is going to run 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 times. But if my string had a length of 7, this for loop would run 7 times. If it had a length of 12, this for loop would run 12 times. This for loop will run exactly as many or as few times as we need it to if we're trying to do something like log each character of this string to the console. HELLO. Let's change the value of my string to Kingsley Papa Giorgio, a considerably longer string, and run that same for loop again. Well, now we get a much longer loop, but it still runs only as many times as it needs to, no more and no less, because we used my string.length, the length property of this string, as our terminating condition. Okay. That's interesting. Let's move on because this is actually a big typo. Number 29. How many times will this loop run? Var my string 3. If 100 mod 2 equals 0. So this question should be, what's going to be the, oh, here we go, I see. So if 100 mod 2 equals 0, well, does 100 divided by 2 have a remainder of 0? It does. So that's true, which means my string 3 has a value of 100 is even, which means this for loop, which uses my string 3.length, is going to run 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 times. Number 30. In the following for loop, when I equals 4, what will log to the console? So we're logging the characters at the I index inside this string eulalia. So when I is 0, we're going to get the E. When it's 1, we get the U. 2, the L. 3, the A. 4, the other L. Okay, it's the equivalent of writing console.log eulalia at the 4th index. When I equals 4, you simply replace I with 4, and we get an L. When I is 0, you get the E. In the following for loop, when I equals 6, what will log to the console? So let's plug in 6 for I. 6 times 2 is 12. Minus 2 is 10. So what's at the 10th index of this string? Well, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 6 is that space. 7, 8, 9, 10. Let me count that again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Oh, I'm sorry. 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. So we should get that A. Number 32, what is the standard function syntax? And what are function parameters? Well, whenever you write a function, you write the keyword function, followed by the name of your function, followed by parentheses, and curly braces. And inside those curly braces is where you write your code. Okay, now this function is not going to execute just because I wrote it and executed the code. The code inside our function is only going to execute when I invoke my function. Like that. Okay, so in this way you can define a task for a function to do, and then you can invoke that function to perform that task whenever you'd like, under certain conditions, or when a user does something specific. Okay. And how do you invoke the following function, greet? Well, it would simply be greet with those parentheses. Last thing, what are function parameters and what are function arguments? Well, some functions can take parameters like, let's call them x and y. I'm defining a function called sum, which is going to return x plus y. So it's going to return the sum of x and y. X and y are parameters, but what are they really? They can be anything. The reality is that they tell our function to expect to receive 2 arguments when it is invoked. So when I want to invoke sum, I can't just do this. I get this error, not a number, ending in. I need to include 2 arguments, like 4 and 6, and this will return 10. Or 40 and 65, and this will return 105, etc., etc. Alright guys, hope this was helpful. Thanks very much. Talk to you soon.